Prevention Month, and it's fitting that we gathered together this morning to talk about how to address what is really an incredibly tragic issue. I had an opportunity this morning to hear from several groups during our roundtable discussion, and two representatives of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition are here with me now. Adrienne Reese with the Broward Sheriff's Office and Kristen Stadline with Chrysalis Health, which works to help victims of human trafficking. This is a very serious issue and one that I've been passionate about through my legislative career. As a mom, and I'm always a mom first, one of the things that has been very important to me is to bring issues to the top of the legislative agenda, whether it was in the state legislature or now in Congress, that wouldn't otherwise necessarily be a high priority. As a mom of twin 12-year-olds, human trafficking and human and sexual trafficking is an incredibly important issue because that is the prime age that primarily girls end up getting trafficked if they're runaways or smuggled into the country or out of the country for that purpose. Many Americans think that human trafficking is something that occurs only in third world countries. But unfortunately, right here in the United States, one person is sold into human trafficking every 10 minutes. With children as young as 13 being sold into a form of slavery that subjects them to pornography and prostitution, more must be done to curb these atrocities. As a state legislator, I worked to pass the first state law that outlawed human and sexual trafficking in the state of Florida. Sadly, we still have a long way to go in the fight to end trafficking, but with the efforts of groups like the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition and all the others that I met with today, we're getting closer every day. In Washington, I'm working with my colleagues across the aisle on anti-trafficking legislation, like the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, as well as other bills like the Violence Against Women Act and the Adam Walsh Reauthorization Act. These bills strive to help victims and curb the trafficking epidemic in our country. It was important to me this morning to hear directly from the people on the front lines here in South Florida and be able to voice their input when I'm back in Washington, D.C. It is really incredibly important. Some of the things I learned this morning is that resources are really a serious issue. There is a really significant need to be able to assist these young women once they are rescued from trafficking. They need a full range of services, whether it's sheltering or counseling or any one of the myriad of services that Kristen and Adrienne can talk to you about. But beyond resources, they also, one of the things that I learned was that many of the different facets of the system touch the same girl, whether it's a cross-pollination of the juvenile detention system and the child support system. There's foster kids who are in the PACE system, who also are in the delinquent system, and so there's a lot of overlap. And it's important that we make sure that through efforts like the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition, that they be able to coordinate, work together, have the resources that they need, and be able to get the girls the kinds of services that they need to get them out of the trafficking system. Because a lot of it is that these girls have nowhere else to go, they have no support network, they have no families, and even once they're rescued, it seems it's often very difficult to pull them away from what is essentially a magnet for them. Because the trafficking system, the pimps, the people that traffic them, they're constantly luring them and often using them as lures and as recruiters for other girls. So this is a really incredibly vexing and challenging problem. It's an insidious, disgusting, hateful act, and one in which, as a mom, as a legislator, as a representative of this community, that I have chosen to make a high priority, and now I'll have an opportunity to go back to Washington and continue the fight. So I want to introduce Adrienne Reese, who is the chair of the Broward County Human Trafficking Coalition. Adrienne, thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming today. My name is Adrienne Reese, and I'm actually a community involvement specialist here with the Broward County Sheriff's Office, as well as president and chair of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition, which is essentially an organization that is here to make the public and other agencies aware that this problem even exists. Once you have awareness and the public is educated, then more tips are generated. As tips are generated, the opportunity exists to intervene and rescue survivors and victims of this heinous crime. After which, of course, comes a restoration process, which victims are able to get on with their lives. And this is a very complex crime, but make no mistake, this is a crime about greed. This is a crime about individuals who are going to prey upon the most vulnerable of our society, whether they be children, women, even men are victims of this crime. And we are working very, very diligently as the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition to have a number of entities around the table working together in concert. If you think about the Olympic rings and how they interconnect, that's much how we are working now. We are working together as a unified force, educating one another to understand the complexities of this crime. Law enforcement is at the table at every level. We have federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and local entities as well. Every NGO that we can think of that touches the lives of children and these survivors is at the table as well. And everybody's talking. And conversation is a good thing. Conversation can create the change that we need that's necessary. And with the help of the Congresswoman, we hope to march forward in every respect. So thank you so much for being here today and taking your time. And I'd like to pass it on to Kristen Stabline, please, to speak on behalf of the coalition as well.
My name is Kristen Stabline. I'm the Director of Residential Services for Chrysalis Health. We have group homes. We provide care for adolescents between the ages of 12 and 18. I've had the great pleasure of working with Adrian and the rest of the members of the coalition to try to put a stop to and try to intervene in the lives of these young people that are being exploited. So we care for kids on every level that are involved in every level of exploitation and recruitment. We have girls that are recruiting. We have girls that have been recruited. We have some young men that have been involved at different levels. We continue to work as a team, come together and staff the cases, and it's a strong community, and there's a lot of people involved that are working very hard to put this on.
We'd be glad to take any questions.
Congressman, where does your legislation stand right now?
Well, it's not my legislation.
In terms of what you are trying to get?
There is a Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act that has been proposed. There are two different versions of it, and it's essentially stalled right now in the Republican House. There's it's gotten a little bit bogged down in some controversy, unrelated controversy. Pretty frustrating because obviously if we can reauthorize it and update and improve the law as this crime becomes more sophisticated, more widespread, there are newer challenges that these organizations face in trying to help rescue girls. And also, one of the things that I think is important to focus on is that you have the young girls, and in some cases young boys, who ultimately end up being trafficked. And then there's also the young people who are at risk of being trafficked. And my sense is that the young people at risk, the runaways, kids in countries who are trafficked, in other countries who are trafficked here, and other at-risk kids, there aren't really a lot of services. And we've got to focus in on making young people who are at risk aware of what to watch out for, of how not to get drawn in. Because essentially what happens is once they are drawn in, they're lured by the magnet of money, and these are kids that are really lost, essentially. They have no parents, they don't have, or if they have, if they have family, that it's not family that's cared for them. So if they get lured in, they're lured in because of the promise of riches and caring for them, and so we need to make sure that there are services for them so that they can avoid the lures and avoid getting drawn in, and that's what's lacking right now. So the legislation is stalled. There is the Violence Against Women Act that is supposed to be reauthorized this year, which has some human sexual trafficking provisions related to it, and the Adam Walsh Act, which is also up for reauthorization.
Is the Violence Against Women Act also bogged down?
It has yet to be taken up. We expect that, I'm working with, and I actually just had Chairman Lamar Smith here, who's a conservative Republican from Texas, who I work closely with on a number of pieces of legislation, and he and I are working on this bill together. He expects that the Judiciary Committee will take it up when we come back.
If one of you guys could address, who are we talking about in Broward County in South Florida? We're talking about, you know, American girls, or are we talking primarily about women from other countries being brought into the U.S.?
Well, I think that first of all, you have to be able to recognize that this is a crime that is international and domestic in nature. It's one of exploitation, and it's of vulnerable, whoever they may be, whether they're coming in or going out domestically or internationally. And here, if you're speaking specific to Broward County, we had the recent situation with the, what was the term, the boom mill room, where a man and a woman that were running that home were recently, well, one pled, I believe Ms. Harris pled and Mr. Mosey is to be sentenced February 28th. They were found guilty of domestic minor sex trafficking and sex trafficking. And then you have situations where it's international, where we have places that are operating as illegitimate establishments that are exploiting persons who come over from other countries seeking a better life. And so you have a number of different aspects to the criminal problem.
Anyone else? Or Kristen?
I can talk about, we primarily deal with children in foster care. Our group homes are serve as adolescents who are dependents of the state. We also, through our agency, have had referrals for community kids. Typically, they're girls, ages 12 to 17. We have them at various ages. I have, you know, one right now that was exploited and controlled by a parent from the age of 12 to 13. She's now 16. And it varies. I have one that was pulled out of a house in Coral Springs 2 years ago, and she'll be 18 this August. So really, it's girls and vulnerable